Boom. What's up, everyone? Welcome to Simulation. I'm your host, Alan Saki. I'm really excited to have you guys in and tuning in for this Thoughts on Warfare episode. And there's a lot to talk about here. And welcome to, for those that are new to our multidisciplinary channel, where we feature some of the greatest minds of our time for long-form, nuance-driven, thought-provoking conversations. And this episode is going to be all about the circumstances and the civilizations and the different exponential technologies that are going into all of the variables of warfare and why this is really important to actually talk about in all of its nuance. So let's start unpacking. So the first thing that I think is really important to look at, and I have these notes here for us to look over as we go, is the word circumstances and relativity, because everyone wants to think that they wouldn't be the prison camp guard at Auschwitz, but the reality is that the environment around you is extremely pressing onto one's belief structures, and so it becomes very difficult in order to completely think free thinking away from the 99% that are trying to push you to conform to a certain way of thought. So when it comes to all of the people that have somehow made these greedy or corrupt decisions, they have been a product of certain circumstances that have led them to have that as their train of thought and their decision making. Now, what forces come from outside of the planet Earth and the human body and come through the portals of the human body in order to command these negative, corrupt forces are yet to be fully explored and discussed and talked about, but a lot of people do feel into them and tune into them and talk about them. All right. So let's move into, so as long as we have that understanding, first and foremost, is so crucial, the circumstances and relativity around all these things. All right, so moving into the next part, we kind of started talking about them, greed and corruption and dehumanization. A lot of war stems from how we mistreat other humans and we dehumanize them from even being human in the first place, that we think that they are lesser than us, therefore it is okay for us to commit these atrocious, horrendous crimes like killing them or pillaging them. And so it's things like that that have sent us into a sort of warfare-driven understanding, because we had a limitation of resources. We thought that we had a limit of land, we had a limit of plants and animals, we had a limit of houses, a limit of all of these things, and limitation versus abundance is the reason why we were in many ways killing each other. And so these limits, that's why we got greedy, that's why we dehumanized others and made it okay to commit these atrocious crimes against them. And look at how far we've progressed. The image that you see behind me right now is of the International Space Station, which is a collaborative effort across the world in order for us to be able to successfully keep that going. And that's the type of stuff that we're going to see in the future, those types of projects. I love that project. That's one of the pinnacle ideas that we've been able to achieve as a collective. So I look forward to seeing many more of those. So you come back to the notes. A lot of what happens on the planet also stems from mental health issues. So we have a lot of trauma that still happens on Earth. So we have when people view other people that are addicted, we just posted this. Well, I did across my personal channels, but the idea of addiction stems from a lot of times trauma, as in people had some sort of trauma in their earlier years that led them to have these addictions to power or to fame or to materialism or to drug use or to violence or whatever it is. So a lot of that has baked into the way that we today live as a civilization, and a lot of that is the reasons why we have warfare in many ways on the planet, is because of these traumatic issues that have happened in the past, how we still again think in terms of limitation instead of abundance. It's a big key principle in what we're discussing. All right, moving on to being littered with lost civilizations and littered with genocides and all the millions of people that have died. So we've had 100 billion plus people that have lived and died on Earth before us today. 100 billion people have lived and died before us today. And that's a lot of people building, we've talked about that a lot, building the civilization that we have today. But tens of millions of those people, if not hundreds of millions, which we would have to do our research and understand, but it could even be hundreds of millions of people, were unjustly murdered for limitation, thoughts on limitation instead of abundance, that they needed to pillage their land, or they needed to pillage their resources. Other people needed to do that. They wanted to do it for more greed, for more corruption, for more of their own. Therefore, people unjustly died, and they were not able to enjoy themselves on this planet that they were so graciously gifted. And there's so many lost civilizations that are here that have passed, that were completely wiped out. And I mean, literally an entire civilization not wiped out, and not just an individual. And then the countless amounts of genocides. So I'm going to touch on this in great depth at the end, but time for peace. It's time for peace. But on the way, we're going to talk about cyber warfare, because this is extremely intense. What's going on with all of the different types of warfare strategies that exist on the planet, and the ability for such easy manipulations to occur on to people's being is extremely dangerous. And the technology has never been this powerful and this enabling to make these manipulations. So it's more important now than ever to figure out how to ethically move forward as a civilization in the cyber warfare age. This is pressing, this is crucial, and we're going to talk about this. Okay, I have up, and I'll show you guys my screen here. So I've brought into the conversation CoinTellPro, because I want to talk about this. This is one of many of these. CoinTellPro is a portmanteau derived from counterintelligence program. And so a series of covert and at times illegal projects conducted by the United States FBI aimed at surveilling, infiltrating, discrediting, and disrupting domestic political organizations. And so there's countless of them here. The Communist Party USA, anti-Vietnam War organizers, activists of civil rights movement or Black Power movement, MLK Jr., Nation of Islam, and the Black Panther Party, feminist organizations, the American Indian movement, and these independent movements. So I'm bringing this up because I want people to know that this is not just a single sort of instance that's happening today. This has been happening over time, not only in the United States, but across other countries as well, where other countries are launching these warfare programs on their own citizenry to have a certain agenda baked in that they want to achieve. And that agenda may be good for just a handful of people that have the most wealth versus the amount of people that is, again, best for everyone. And that's very difficult to know what is. But so people are launching off programs like this, and they've been going on since the beginning of time. Everything from manipulations like the, let's see if we, I want us to get to, this is an interesting image for it, but I would definitely want to get to this one. So all the way back to the ancient civilizations, where you were doing things like manipulating other civilizations by sending them like the Trojan horse, or by manipulating them through sending spies into their villages, as you know, and then the spies would come back and give data, and then be able to more easily infiltrate the village, so or the town and whatnot. So this has been going on for extremely long periods of time, and it's really important to look over the methods here. I want to show the intended effects and the methods both. So the intended effects on organizations like CoinTellPro: create a negative public image for target groups by surveilling activists and then releasing negative personal information to the public. That in itself is already hugely crazy. Break down internal organization by creating conflicts, by having agents exacerbate racial tensions or send anonymous letters to try and create conflicts. create dissension between groups by spreading rumors that other groups were stealing money, restrict access to public resources by pressuring nonprofit organizations to cut off funding or material support, restrict the ability to organize protests, restrict the ability of individuals to participate in group activities by character assassinations, false arrests, surveillance. This is extremely insane. These intended effects, they're like, how can you completely suppress individuals from expressing what they desire into the world? And that is absolutely nuts, and it's completely mind-blowing that is what is currently going on. Let's get that logo spinning above the head. There it is. So when I'm pushed to this point of looking at the way that these oppressions have been going on, these structural violences have been going on, it drives me nuts, because this is not the way that a peaceful and humane society should be living and collectively prospering. It's a way that a society for only a certain few is prospering at ways that it maximizes the potential of just a couple people that are more greedy, that are more corrupt. And so it's extremely nuanced as well, because you have to remember that there are actually things that government agencies do that prevents people from being assassinated, or they prevent people from being hurt by the masses. So most people will have a binary stance on this, and I definitely skew towards the side of figuring out the right resource flows and infrastructures for maximizing everyone's potential. But in terms of the government actually doing some things right in order to retain some sort of sense of peace or equilibrium, or people just not being obliterated and dying by the masses, they do some of that right. So it's not to be completely binary here, that the government definitely does some of the things that are right, but that at the same time, when you look at this, it also becomes crazy, and then this is where we're going to get into cyber war, because the methods that they're using are, again, look at this. 8, infiltration. Agents and informers did not merely spy on political activists. Their main purpose was to discredit, disrupt, and negatively redirect action. Their very presence served to undermine trust and scare off potential supporters. The FBI and police exploited this fear to smear genuine activists as agents. Psychological warfare. The FBI and police used myriad dirty tricks to undermine progressive movements. Bad jacketing to create suspicion about targeted activists, sometimes with lethal consequences. Harassment via the legal system. Illegal force. Undermine public opinion. There's so many of these methods, right? And now I want to direct us to this, which is, not only were we talking about the different countries in the world and how the different countries around the world do this too, like China, Russia, the area of the Middle East, the area of Europe, South America, and Africa, because they do this differently with their own greedy and corrupt leaderships, that sometimes they think they're doing something right, and they may be making it so that people can live more peacefully, but at the same time, other times they're doing it to thwart off a political organization that is attempting to potentially do something like remove a structural violence. All right, moving on to deep fakes. This is extremely important. We've had people like Dr. Roman Yampolsky on our show, an AI safety and security researcher. And deepfakes are an immensely important deal, because we're currently seeing what could be the next sort of jump in propaganda on the internet, that people can't distinguishably tell what's real and what's not, which is a big issue, because when next time you see a video of someone, you may not even know if that video is actually really them speaking or not. This could be the president of a country. This could even be just the leader of a very large company. And so that's extremely challenging, because that disinformation completely changes the way that we perceive what we thought to be true or not. So that's a major point. So is just psychometrics and targeted propaganda in general, being able to analyze through even just a couple hundred likes, that you can analyze the way that you can predict the way that someone's going to vote or behave. And so that way you can send them targeted propaganda. And these types of studies have been going on for a while now, for a couple decades, where you can just psychometrically pick, based on Ocean, the big 5 personality traits, that you can just like that, you can know how someone is going to behave when you send them a certain propaganda. Bio and neuro warfare is extremely important. We talked about this a lot during the during the We're Not Ready Yet for Transhumanism episode, because when you have things like these extremely exponential technologies that can absolutely obliterate civilizations, or give a tremendous amount of power to those that are malevolent, that it's really important to slow down and think and actually figure out how to best progress ethically with those technologies. And again, we talked about this in great depth, but we move on to things like drone and robot warfare. And again, we see so much of that potential malevolence that we have to slow down and ethically think about how to collaborate together as a planet moving forward. Centralized versus decentralized warfare. This is very interesting. There may be a period of time where we see centralized organizations try and hurt decentralized organizations because they don't want to lose their power. Meanwhile, decentralized power, I think, is going to erupt around the planet. And we're on our way out here on the Thoughts on Warfare episode. I'm really excited for the role of youth, especially Generation Z, as they evolve, because I think they are going to be the ones that help us figure out how to move forward peacefully, how to move forward with a push for a spiritual communion. And I think that spiritual communion, and for many people, is a practice of just believing in something greater than themselves that transcends their human body, whether that be through a believing in a deity or believing in a meditation practice or a psychedelic practice, that there is a spiritual with the communion with the infinite. And then it's going to be incredible seeing more and more people become actualized in that bottom-up revolution. I'm going to talk about that right here on the way out. We'll have coherence with energy, with earth energy, and eradication of greed, corruption, violence, and an increase in accountability. So the revolution has to happen one of two ways, pretty much top down or bottom up. I've talked about this before, that you can try and do something like microdose the United Nations General Assembly, which is, again, people usually aren't ready for some sort of spiritual, like they would definitely not, a lot of them would not be ready for that sort of spiritual growth, and so they might actually have a really poor experience because of that. So it's really important to know who's ready and when they're ready and how they're ready. So a bottom-up experience where people have at their own time, sort of in the lower rungs of the socioeconomic statuses, they have went through processes of spiritual actualization, and they can more easily guide the future trajectory of a collective conscious progress on civilization. Damn, this stuff is so interestingly difficult to actually speak about. I'm glad that I'm going for it. I think, so you can check this out. Top down is much more less likely to happen. There's too many of those pressures and unearned wisdoms, and there's too much old money involved. And so how do we actualize and maximize the potential of young people to build these new resource flows and frameworks? And so that's where I'll end the episode on the Thoughts on Warfare. You got to remember the relativity of all of these things, that war in the past has been going on since we've started as a civilization. And in order for us to transcend war, in order for us to move forward with true love and harmony and peace, that we have to have a deep sense of empathy for each other. We have to have a deep sense of removing the structural violences, of removing the evil parasitic energies of overtly greedy and corrupt people and corporations and governments. And we can do that together. That is not impossible to do, but it's going to require a lot of work and a lot of time and a lot of spiritual hustle for us and a lot of economic framework redesigning. And so that's all up to us, and that's up to us to work with the young people to be able to do so. Thanks for tuning into this episode on Thoughts on Warfare. I greatly appreciate it. I'm Alan Saki. I'm the host of Simulation. And check out our channel, check out our other videos. We'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Let us know your thoughts about how to move forward with this. Join our public Telegram where we have these thoughts. The link's in the bio of this video. Also, build the future. Go and manifest your destiny into the world, everyone. Much love, and I'll see you soon. Peace.